Welcome to episode 43 of Fascinating, a Star Trek podcast. Wolf in the Fold.
In this week's episode, Scotty faces accusations of murder after he is found at the scene of 3 killings with his fingerprints on the knife and no recollection of the events. When the local justice system breaks down, proceedings are remitted to the Enterprise. But can Kirk find the truth before his chief engineer is sentenced to death by torture? Or is Scotty's time on board about to come to an abrupt end?
What's the sedative situation?
I've got some stuff that would tranquilize an active volcano.
Good. Start distribution immediately.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm not too bad, Jay. That's a bit...
Sedated?
Well, I was going to say, slow-witted.
As always, then. Just the usual?
Just normal.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm very good. Not quite as warm as last week, which is a positive thing.
It's a relief.
It is.
And we had another murder mystery on the show.
Yeah.
Second one in about 4 weeks.
I liked this episode.
Did you?
It was extremely stupid, ridiculous, but very enjoyable.
Did you like the retcon for Jack the Ripper?
Yeah. I mean, we've now solved it, so that's...
All those books, all that time wasted.
Down the tube.
Oh dear.
No, I really like this. I do like a bit, Ian, I do like a bit of Sherlock Holmes, a bit of Victorian London murder mystery, a bit of Jack the Ripper himself. I'm always a sucker for that type of thing, so I appreciated this.
Well, that's good. It was well seen that the episode was made before all the popular serial killers were famous.
Well, that's the thing. I've taken a note of that. At one point in this episode, the computer reels off the list of known serial killers. Although it wasn't referred to as a serial killer, that term wasn't yet invented in the 60s. So they go from, there's one thing in 1974, then it's way into the future.
Yeah, there won't be that many.
Yeah, it can't be that. Won't be that. Never mind you. What about Hill? What about Ted? What about Ramirez?
I'm sure you've got a long list.
Well, I mean, the 70s was, in America certainly, was peak serial killer. That's when it was all happening. That was the high point. 70s and 80s, all sorts. But no, they skip over that. Disappointing. Very disappointing.
Their predictive powers have failed them.
They showed themselves up, actually. They embarrassed themselves there.
They have.
Let's crack on.
We begin in some kind of cafe. It's kind of an Eastern theme, maybe sort of Persian or Turkish.
Turkish, yeah. We start with some on-stage belly action as an audience eat and drink, which includes Kirk, McCoy and Scotty, who is, I have to say, this entire episode, I don't care what the resolution is, Scotty deserves to be found guilty.
I'm not yet convinced he's not guilty.
He's watching on like a weirdo here. A creep.
We've already seen that he has questionable behaviour around women in previous episodes.
Without a doubt. He's the type of guy who's watching, he's at a lap dancing club and you can tell that he hates women.
Indeed.
There's a problem there. They should be worried.
Well, that gets explained shortly.
It does, but that note I took was before that it got explained. It was just that initial look, that glance, the manic, it's also a touch of the, you see it a lot in movies, especially American movies, and you see these guys who are always whooping and hollering at the dancers on stage, get overly excited because they're doing their thing. And on the occasions which I wouldn't go to anymore, but in the past I have been in that sort of environment, and that's not how you act, and that's not how people act. It's only in these American movies they always want to clamber onto the stage and a bouncer has to throw them off. I've never ever seen that. It's a girl with dancing a little bit. Calm yourself down, pal.
Okay.
And it's not even these frat boy types. Often it's like businessmen, they've got their tie around their head and wearing suits.
They get too excited in their one night out.
Yeah. Anyhow, Scotty's almost like that.
Yeah, I've noted here that he's very into it.
Yeah. He breaks into a bigger smile, declaring that he is going to like the place that they're at, as Kirk confirms that the women are here for pleasure. A sensation that the Argalians rate very highly. We haven't mentioned, but on Argalia and
Argalius, yeah.
Argalius, whatever that is, yeah.
McCoy says it's a completely hedonistic or hedonistic society.
And Scotty confirms that he does very much like the dancer, which is good, as Kirk has invited her over to the table to meet him. I've got a feeling that Kirk has paid for her.
Do you think so?
Again, it's a trope from the movies. It feels like where there's one person, maybe it's his birthday, or maybe he's a virgin. That's the thing. The rest of them have all grouped together, and he doesn't know. Like Kirk knows the dancer or whatever, so he says, "Listen, he's a bit of a sad sack. Pretend that you like him. Do your thing, and don't let him know."
She finishes her dance, and Scotty applauds.
Okay, yeah, he does. Well, he does applaud, but he applauds by tapping the table. And there's a Scottish connection here, a reference.
There's a reference which makes no sense.
No.
So Kirk explains to him that's bad form in this planet. You should be using your lights to signal your appreciation. And he says something along the lines of, no one has to tell an old Aberdeen pub crawler how to applaud. Is that something they're famous for in Aberdeen?
No, they're not at all.
I don't think people in Aberdeen don't applaud, do they? They're all miserable.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. They're known for being quite,
dour,
yeah.
They wouldn't know applause if it hit them in the face.
No.
Anyway. A man at a neighbouring table is visibly irritated when the dancer joins Kirk and McCoy and Scotty.
That's true. He's quite disgruntled, although it's clear that he couldn't have he's not had his nose put out of joint.
Why do you say that?
No, did you see his nose? There's no joint there.
Okay.
We'll get back to him. I like him. He's in one of my favourite movies. I've mentioned before.
Fair enough.
Anyway, the dancer sashays her way over to them, and we see this chap not very happy at all. Scotty continues to be creepy. He's got a very thirsty smile on his face.
He does. And this man at the next table, he gets up and leaves at this point.
As Scotty has luck with a terrible pick-up line, and we find out why they are there.
Tis a fine foggy night tonight, and I doubt if anyone has ever told you of the marvellous fogs we have in Aberdeen.
Never a word, but I'm dying to learn.
Well, then why don't I show you? There's nothing like a walk in the fog with a bonny lass.
Or a handsome gentleman. Why don't we?
You don't mind, do you? I might even get back to the ship on time.
We won't leave without you, Scotty. Relax and enjoy yourself. My work is never done.
My work, Jim. This is prescription stuff. Don't forget, the explosion that threw Scotty against the bulkhead was caused by a woman.
Physically, he's all right. Am I right in assuming that?
Oh, yes. And matter of fact, considerable psychological damage could have been caused. For example, his total resentment toward women.
He seems to be overcoming his resentment.
Of course, in my professional opinion, when he gets back to the ship, he's going to hate you for making him leave Orgelius. But then he will have lost total resentment toward women.
Mission accomplished as far as Scotty is concerned. Bones, I know a little place across town where the women...
Oh, yes, I know the place. Let's go.
There's quite a lot to unpack in that clip, I think, Ian.
A huge amount.
Can we start by, as I said before, the dreadful chat-up line about a walk in the fog? His assumption that, or his question, referencing Aberdeen, she's not even from Earth. Why would she know about the fog and that? Don't talk rubbish. And it only supports my belief that she's been paid for this, because he's giving it this nonsense and she says, oh, we're a handsome gentleman. She doesn't think that at all.
She's only just met him, yeah.
Yeah, she's away for a walk with him. Again, it's like in Police Academy when Mahoney plays the old prostitute to sort out somebody. I can't even remember who it is, but that's the relationship I feel there is there.
After he goes, there's still more that we need to suss out here. So,
oh yeah,
clunky exposition aside, McCoy's position here, and it didn't sound like he was kidding.
Nope.
Is that because a woman caused an explosion on board, a female officer, we should probably say, that resulted in Scotty having a concussion, he will now hate women.
So there's two things about that. One is, why would you think that? But two, if it is the case, why would he be assumed he would hate women because of this? The amount of times that Kirk or the rest of them have caused problems, have got people killed, have made decisions, do they hate men because of that?
No, he's a misogynist.
Exactly. And he is, and I think from what we've seen in the previous episodes, that's the only conclusion that can be safely drawn. He is innately hostile to women.
Yeah, and I think they know that, and they're basically covering for him with their own sort of internal canon for his behaviour, as it were. They're justifying his behaviour by saying it's to do with this, but really what they should be saying is, he's a menace.
He is, and I don't know why we've brought him down to this planet to introduce him to women.
Well, because they don't care about the women on the planet.
Clearly.
They just want him to get past whatever temporary problem he's having.
Even if that is correct, and he has got a mental issue, a psychological issue with women because of the accident. The fact that he would like to sleep with them or is happy to, doesn't mean that has therefore been overcame. I mean, it's like saying there's racists out there who would happily be with a member of a different race. It doesn't mean they say that they respect him anymore. It doesn't mean they say that they...
Well, you saw it with slave owners had children.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. So the fact that he is attracted to a woman, happy to use him for his own gratification, does nothing to suggest
it's about
that...
him again, yeah. It's not about any sort of mellowing towards women generally. If he's got this problem, it needs to be addressed in a different way.
Yeah. Anyway, we might have taken it a little bit too far there, but...
I don't think so. I think this is what the story leads us to. It's quite clear that he has this issue. Anyway, where do you think Kirk and McCoy are going?
To a brothel.
Is that what you think?
Yeah. Where the women do that thing with the ping pong balls.
Oh, okay. Obviously. Out on the street, there's knee-high fog.
That's the thing, isn't it? I'm not sure that's how fog works. It's
not.
Almost as if there's a chap with a smoke machine. Sorry, but it does have the sort of Victorian London Jack the Ripper feel to it. And again, I took that note before knowing anything else.
It certainly does. And Kirk isn't quite sure what way to go when he hears a scream.
And so they go running to see what's happened. And unsurprisingly, they find the woman from the restaurant who left with Scotty dead, viciously stabbed 12 times.
And behind them is Scotty holding the knife.
Yeah, I mean, this is the smoking gun, the bloody knife.
Case closed.
At this point, yeah, there is no... we're talking literally seconds from the scream to him having the knife in his hand.
A known hater of women.
Yeah, who was about to leave with her to... Somebody just picked up
a
dancer.
A man who's shown that he can be possessive about women as well, so any kind of rejection is probably going to trigger him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much more to be done here.
End credits.
Yeah, well, certainly we get some kind of credits.
Opening credits, Captain's Log, 3614.9. We get a recap and what else?
We learn about the Chief City Administrator, Mr. Hengist, who's investigating the crime.
But apparently has found little to go on, apart from the opportunity, the weapon...
And the motive.
You don't need anything else to go on. He's guilty.
Yeah. This suggestion that he's learned little of value is asinine.
The only way that you could not be guilty is if there was some sort of supernatural...
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's not been framed, is he? He's not picked up this knife.
Yeah.
What, someone stunned him and put a knife in his hand?
Someone else hasn't done it and then, yeah.
Ridiculous. Anyway, back in the cafe where they started off, this guy Hengist is a vicious wee man. He's trying to put things in perspective. I
liked the actor playing him because he was irritating.
Yes, he was very good.
Yeah. He apparently is lost for what to do. He's no resources to investigate such a thing as it has never happened before. No, never even been considered. They're a peaceful, loving...
It's a crime-free planet.
Yeah.
He's shocked that this would happen here.
However, he, like all administrators, is not a native, himself being from Rigel 4.
That's true. He says that if he'd been on his own planet, they'd have a team of investigators.
Yeah, I think that's a clue here, isn't it? That he mentions the fact that they are a gentle race, so therefore whoever has done this must be an outsider.
Almost certainly. Scotty.
Yeah, that's it. He holds up the weapon to Scotty, who claims not to remember having seen it before. Not that... I can't remember. Have you seen this before? Don't remember.
Yeah. Hengist is quite rightly scathing of this convenient memory loss.
Yeah, especially when Scotty comes up with his story as to what happened.
He was leading the girl through the fog and she started screaming behind him. He turned around and doesn't remember anything else.
That's not even what you do. You're out with someone, you don't lead them through the...
Yeah, so they're not conversing, he's just like saying, follow me.
Yeah, you go arm in arm or hand in hand.
Where's he taking her?
Well...
To be murdered.
Yeah, she obviously refused his advances.
So he stabbed her.
Yeah.
It's quite apparent. Anyhow, Kirk tries to draw this memory from Scotty by grabbing him and telling him he has to remember. But it's not a very scientific technique.
It's not, and McCoy takes him to one side, tells him to go easy on Scotty, but Kirk correctly points out that he has a responsibility to follow the laws of the Argelians, and it doesn't matter what they think in terms of him being innocent or not. Now, he mentions this another point in the episode. All of a sudden now he's respectful of the cultures and the thoughts of...
Well, they're all wearing clothes and they're not carrying spears, so therefore he can respect their laws.
Clearly. However, McCoy tells Kirk that Scotty has severe concussion, and Kirk assures him that they will do what they can.
He looks dubious, though.
You would do. You're thinking, he's done this, how am I going to get him out? Should I?
Hengist comes back with another key piece of evidence.
Yes, what's that?
Only Scotty's fingerprints are on the murder weapon. This episode should be wrapped up now. This is the end.
There would be no if you found him guilty and doled out whatever punishment was due on this planet, you could not argue. Anyone revising or looking over the case to make sure that everything had been done properly would have no issues. They'd say, yep, that's fine. You've got everything you need.
Yeah, and just because his friends say, oh no, he couldn't have done this.
No, it's a sound conviction.
Absolutely. Kirk tries to divert the discussion onto other suspects.
Yeah. Oh, there was 2 people who left. Excuse me, you're saying that your defence is that you were in a busy cafe and there were some other people there who left. Yeah, they left.
Suspects.
Acting suspiciously, they left the place.
Without killing anybody. Hengist says they will be spoken to, but things look grim for Scotty, which I think is fair enough.
Entirely. Kirk then asks what the law is, and is answered not by Hengist, but by a chap sporting a goatee and a young female partner.
Jarvis, yes, he's here to mess everything up. He says that the law of Argelius is love.
That's nonsense. You can't, you're asking for trouble.
Yes. He says that, Hengist says this is the prefect, and Jarvis then introduces his wife, Subo. Hengist shows Jarvis which one is Scotty, and he says he doesn't look like a killer. Well, that'll be that then.
That's fine. On you go, Scotty. You're free.
You have the face of an angel.
But it does mention that before their great awakening 200 years ago, they had means of learning the truth. Something they're going to have to return to.
McCoy knows all about this, the Argelian empathic contact.
Yeah, and they're told that Sybil, or Sybil or Sybil?
Sybil, I don't think it really matters too much.
She has inherited this particular gift, and so they're invited to his home.
Hengist isn't happy. He thinks he should be left to deal with this matter, and he's almost solved the case anyway.
Yeah, I like how he's cut down, because he says it should be handled officially. And Jarvis responds by saying, yeah, well, I'm the highest official in the land, so therefore it is officially being handled.
Yeah. So we end up at Jarvis's house.
Yeah, they all leave to learn the truth. Kirk and McCoy ask if they can beam down a technician with a tricorder who will be...
psycho tricorder?
Yeah, apparently.
I was strongly hoping that this didn't exist and it was a coded message to Spock.
Beam us up, let's get it. Run!
Send the psycho tricorder.
It's like at the start of Indiana Jones, where he's the first one where he's got the idol and he's running to the biplane, shouting, start your engines.
A bit like that. But alas, no, they have invented for this episode a psycho tricorder that can reconstruct a person's day. How many other episodes would that have been useful in? Yeah, it's just the convenient get out, isn't it? Let's make up a MacGuffin and just pretend it's always existed. Hengist tries to deny them this, but Jarvis is open to it, as Sibo needs some rest. Spock agrees to beam somebody down with the psycho tricorder, and McCoy even more dubiously says it requires privacy. So Jarvis offers them a chamber for them to carry out this examination before explaining that his people are disturbed by the murder and there is unfortunate talk of closing down the planet to travellers. Fair enough. Kirk notes that this would be unfortunate given the importance of Argelius as a spaceport. And Jarvis acknowledges it, indicating that it's the only one in the quadrant. I don't think that makes sense. No? The quadrant is huge. Is it? Like all of the, I think, Federation spreads out across one quadrant, more or less, a little bit into a second. Is this a quadrant of what? A quadrant of the galaxy? Yeah. Okay. Hengist then departs to round up the other two suspects. And as he does, we see Lieutenant Karen Tracy materialise and proceed to follow Jarvis to the chamber. Yes, while that's happening, Kirk tells Scotty he needs to cooperate, and he agrees, saying he can't stand not knowing when he knows fine well what he did. So McCoy says, after Scotty goes down to the chamber, McCoy says that murder would be out of character for him, but probably not that far out of character. No, I mean, it's the next logical step. Yeah. He's went to being abusive and
controlling.
Kirk tries to justify Scotty's behaviour, saying that he has had a knock on the head, which could make him more of a killer. McCoy suggests another possibility is hysteria. I mean, it's clear here that they don't believe him.
No.
That he doesn't remember, or that, at least that he didn't do it. McCoy suggests hysterical amnesia, that Scotty could be blocking out the memory of murdering the woman because he can't come to terms with it.
More likely.
Jarvis at this point returns from the chamber, and Sybil, what are we going to go with for her name? Sybil asks for the knife. Unfortunately, no one knows what it is, and just then a scream tears through the house.
Yeah, things have got worse for Scotty. They rush down and find Sybil stabbed to death and Scotty unconscious. Now, come on.
To be fair to Scotty, if he is actually unconscious, someone's done that to him.
No,
You think he's faking it?
He's either faking it, or what can happen in times of great stress, you can faint.
If that's the case, then where's the weapon? They don't find a murder weapon this time.
Do they not?
No.
Do they mention that?
Well, not as a part of the investigation, but they probably should. Because it's still missing.
Anyway, he's guilty.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Back up in the house. After McCoy takes a look at it, Scotty takes a stimulant drink from Jarvis and comes round asking for Tracy. Yeah, this is just an act.
Absolutely. It wasn't even convincing. It was clearly acting.
Even McCoy and Kirk are suspicious of him now.
Yeah.
Especially when he claims he must have passed out and can't remember anything.
Very convenient. Jarvis confirms that there is another exit to that room, but it's been locked for many years.
So Kirk tells McCoy to go and check, just as Hengist returns with the two guys from the cafe and is shocked to learn of the murder and that it was committed in the same way.
Morla, who's one of the men that was picked up, I think the man we talked about who left early with the nose that you like.
Yeah.
He was picked up in the vicinity of the building and is challenged by Hengist, but says he doesn't know anything and didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, is that not after the talk to the other chap?
No, it's before it, because Kirk then tells Hengist there's no sign of the weapon, and then the other guy, Tark, is approached by Kirk.
And Kirk has a go at him. It must be you who's done it, but...
No, it turns out he's the father of the first victim.
Well, okay. Did you love her? You sure?
But he thinks Morla did it.
Why?
Because he's a jealous man who used to be engaged to his daughter and couldn't cope with their separation. This concerns Jarvis, who says that jealousy is not permitted on the planet because of how negative it can be.
McCoy then returns to admit that he can't tell if the lock had been picked or not. Of all the things, McCoy can tell you within seconds if someone's died, how they've died, and what their situation, but he can't tell if a lock's been picked or not.
Yeah, well, that's not really his field.
Surely he can use his little tricorder, and that would be...
He didn't have a tricorder.
Yeah, I could get one.
He could use the psycho tricorder.
Yeah, I'm sure that's just a setting.
Yeah.
An add-on. Hengist then tries to take control of the investigation, which irritates Kirk, and Jarvis has to remind him of the situation.
Captain, may I continue with the questions, please?
Well, get on with it, man. Just don't stand there.
Captain, you're behaving very much like a man who is desperately trying anything to save his friend. Would you be as desperate to save Argelius as a spaceport for your Starfleet?
Well, of course I'm trying to save my friend. If he's innocent, and he hasn't been proven guilty.
Need I remind you of the circumstances, Captain? In both cases, your friend Scott was discovered over the body, and later claimed to remember nothing.
I am ready, Jarvis.
Gentlemen, sit down, please.
On one condition, Friedbeck, that the room be sealed so that no one can leave or enter while the ceremony is going on.
The room is sealed.
Captain, do you mean my neck is going to have to depend on some spooky mumbo-jumbo?
Kirk here.
Spock here, Captain. May I have a word with you?
Yeah. Excuse me, gentlemen.
I think Scotty should be pleased it's coming down to spooky mumbo-jumbo and not facts and evidence.
Without a doubt, it's the only chance he's got.
They all point to him.
Yeah.
Spock has a plan.
Tell me about it.
He wants them to beam everybody up and leg it. That's not quite what he says.
That's pretty much what he's insinuating, hinting at.
I think his feeling is once they're on the Enterprise, they won't have to surrender Scotty back to the Argalians. But anyway, he suggests that they meet in the briefing room and have the computers find out who's telling the truth and who's not.
But at this point, this is the second time Kirk has mentioned this. He said the Argalians are proud and they have to obey their customs and ways. But as mentioned, that's not normally how he operates or thinks.
But I think it's because he knows Scotty's done this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to be seen as...
I think he'd like them to take the decision out of his hands. If he knows that Scotty is a woman-hating murderer...
He doesn't want him on board.
No, he would rather have him dealt with down there and they can say, well, I tried.
Yeah.
See you later.
Justice was done.
Back to the house. The ceremony begins in the dark with them sitting around a flame holding hands like in a seance.
Yeah, and Sybil starts talking about evil.
Yeah, she is leading and claims to feel the presence of something terrible, monstrous and evil, as you said, that has a hatred of women. Yeah.
Scotty. She says it's got a hunger that never dies, that it's an ancient terror with the name Beratus, Kesla or Red Jack.
Yeah, she ends by shouting, Red Jack, Red Jack, Red Jack. And there's a scream, and when the light comes on, what do we see?
She's dead and Scotty's holding her.
That's that. Come on.
3 times now.
It can't be a coincidence. At the very, very least, I think Kirk gets to this, at the very least he is guilty, but the bang in the head has caused some sort of abnormality. But he's definitely doing it.
Well, that's what Kirk concludes.
Yeah.
And I think he's quite right.
Get the maniac locked up. So a little bit later, Kirk states the obvious, but McCoy still tries to defend him.
That's his friend, he's probably blind to the truth.
Yeah, but Kirk tells him he can't even remember what happened, as Hengist comes over to confirm that he's going to find Scotty guilty.
Yeah,
and
quite
you can't argue with it.
No. Kirk claims that although he might be guilty, he can't be held responsible.
Well, we can get to that, I suppose, and the due process will determine that.
Hengist says that his responsibility or otherwise has not been established, and Kirk asks Jarvis whether they can all go up to the Enterprise to clear it up, and McCoy says definitely all doubt will be removed.
They're talking about the sort of technicalities and how to get Scotty off. Meanwhile, a man who's just lost his wife is...
To be fair, Jarvis's mood doesn't seem to have changed much.
Yeah, he doesn't really care.
He's moved on at this point.
Things happen.
He's the prefect. He can get as many young wives as he wants. He agrees. He says that they can go to the Enterprise to prove this beyond doubt, but if Scotty is guilty, the ancient penalties must apply.
Without a doubt. You can't have it both ways.
No. And because the law hasn't been changed for hundreds of years, the penalty for murder is still death by slow torture.
I'm more of a fan of fast torture, but...
Well, if you're Kirk, you're probably hoping it's some kind of disintegrator so you can beam him out the chamber at the last second and they think he's been disintegrated.
In any case, gulping Scotty confirms that he understands what may await him.
We get a brief captain's log.
3615.4.
They say that Scotty's technically under arrest. Okay. They've beamed aboard the Enterprise and the investigation continues, and then we get the longest scene in the history of the original series.
Yeah, it's massive.
Over 15 minutes.
Wow. We're in the briefing room. Kirk explains how their computer analysis will work before Scotty takes the stand and the computer answers Kirk's questions.
Yes. It says that the symptoms Scotty has are not consistent with memory loss, which is a bit of a blow.
On the plus side, the computer states that he is not lying, and Scotty goes on to note that he didn't black out when Sybil was killed. So Kirk asks him to detail what he remembers.
We were holding hands. When the lights went out, the circle was broken. I heard the poor lady screaming. I was near the head of the table anyway. I went toward her, but there was something in my way.
Something? You mean someone?
No, Captain. Some thing. Cold it was, like a stinking draft out of a slaughterhouse, but it wasn't really there. Like a... if you know what I mean.
Computer?
Subject relaying accurate account. No physiological changes.
All right. Let's hit it on the head. Scotty, did you kill Sibo?
No, Captain. That I'm sure of.
He's been saying that right along. Means no more now than it did before.
Scotty, lie to me. How old are you?
22, sir.
Inaccurate. Data in error.
After the lights went out, Mr. Scott, who was holding your hand?
Mola on the one side and you on the other, sir.
But that doesn't mean anything, Captain. With a room that small, the lights were out. Anyone would have had time to kill the lady.
But I remind you, we found Mr. Scott holding her in his arms. The knife's... I'm sorry, sir, but I must. The knife's still in her back, and blood on his hands.
The verifier showed that he was telling the truth when he said he didn't kill her.
There were 2 other women murdered.
Scotty is then tested on the other 2 murders, and his claims to not remember are verified by the computer.
Yeah, Kirk then says that after this, they will run a psycho-tricorder analysis, which will give a complete record.
Hengist objects, and Jarvis tells him to pipe down.
Yeah, I think at first, it's weird, I think at first he agrees that he will be convinced as long as they can prove that the machine is incapable of error. But he can't hold that position for too long. He overplays his hand, he overplays the guilt of Scotty, he doesn't play it cool enough.
Yeah, that's right. And Jarvis slaps him down again, saying that he will be the ultimate arbiter. It's a little bit ad hoc, this whole process. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of the one where it was at the court-martial, where Kirk had everyone just beam up to the ship for an experiment in the middle of his trial.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Morla is brought to the stand, and he says he was angry, but he's not capable of violence, only to be interrupted by Tark.
Yeah, he denies this.
Yes, he says that the 2 of them fought constantly. So Morla is asked straight out, and he denies killing anybody, which the computer confirms is true.
So Kirk invites him to step down. He then recalls the last words of Sibo, and McCoy speaks him.
Yeah, well, just before that, he talks to Spock briefly and says they're taking the wrong approach. It depends what their end goal is. Just because the evidence all keeps pointing to Scotty doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong.
Yes, it's the right approach. You're trying to get to the truth.
Exactly. Anyhow, yes, McCoy remembers the words Redjack, Beratus, and Kesla, so they feed them into the computer.
Sorry, were they not like some great European footballers of the 90s?
For Yugoslavia.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Anyhow, the computer initially rejects these as words, but when asked to consider Redjack as a proper noun, it finds a response.
What's that?
Apparently it's a nickname for Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the room seems to agree that he can't really still be alive, but Kirk suggests that this is an impossibility. Jack can't be alive, but all the evidence points to Jack. No, it doesn't. It points to Scotty.
And just exactly, and just because it's a nickname, she's screaming this doesn't mean to say that is who.
Yeah,
it was him that killed her.
Maybe that's just Scotty's obsessed with Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
or something like that. And that's what she's divined. But anyway, Kirk says this is clear evidence that Jack the Ripper did these killings, and perhaps he wasn't a human man after all.
Kirk carries on. Someone killed 3 women, and if not human, it was driven to kill. And McCoy remembers Sybil saying that it feeds on fear and death. They're putting too much weight onto Sybil's powers, I reckon.
They are. And this entire rest of this scene, I hated all of it. And it reminds me a lot of iMud, when they were just trying to confuse the androids by shooting gibberish at them. So Spock gets in on it at this point.
Okay, tell me about it.
He says humanoids are only a small part of life, and there are creatures that feed on emotion. It's like they're using this sort of 3-pronged attack on Jarvis to confuse him so that he won't convict Scotty.
Yeah.
Hengist steps in, rightly pointing out that this is a fairy story and that there's a prime suspect sitting right there.
Yeah, he's nearly sent over the edge, Hengist. And I said earlier there, he's playing this all wrong.
Yeah, he's getting agitated because Jarvis is too accommodating to the ridiculous theories. He expects just to be told, no, this is nonsense, go with your investigation, the evidence is clear.
Kirk again dismisses his protests and asks Spock for his thoughts, and he points out that Jack the Ripper killed in a highly populated area and therefore suggests the use of a hypnotic screen which would prevent everyone but the victim from seeing him. Come on. They're just making stuff up now. It's Scotty, isn't it?
Yeah, he did it.
Jarvis asks if it is really possible, and McCoy confirms that he has seen many examples, which causes Hengist to blow his top again, and Jarvis has to put him in his place.
Yeah, he wants them to proceed along this line of investigation. Kirk and Spock then have the computer look at unsolved mass murders of women since the time of Jack the Ripper.
And that's what we discussed at the top of the show. You know, there's nothing about Bundy or any of the other ones. You know,
no. 1932 in Shanghai.
Yeah.
1974 in Kiev in the USSR.
Yeah.
Just as well they got the USSR while it was still around.
2105
in the Martian colonies, 2156 in Heliopolis, and Alpha Eridani 2, and additional examples. And Spock points out one clear fact from this trail.
What's that?
These places are all on a direct line from Earth to Argelius.
And so Kirk realises that the thing must have moved out of the galaxy with man.
Across the galaxy, yes.
Yeah. He then next asks the computer to identify the proper names Kesla and Baratis. What's the result?
Well, Kesla's not that important. That's a killer on Deneb 2. But crucially, Baratis was a killer on Rigel 4.
Yeah, mass murderer.
Which is also Hengist's home planet, as we know.
Yes, and at this revelation, they all turn and look at the native of Rigel 4.
You come from Rigel 4?
Well, many people do. It's not a crime.
No, but what we're investigating is. Would you mind taking the stand, Mr. Hengist?
Oh, I will not.
Mr. Hengist.
Prefect, this has gone far enough. I will not take the stand.
I can appreciate your position, sir. You are in charge of civil disturbances locally. If you are the entity for which we search, what better position from which to kill with impunity?
Just after you left Jarvis's house, we discovered the murder knife was missing.
And you were unaccounted for when Lieutenant Tracy was murdered.
An entity which feeds on fear and terror would find a perfect hunting ground on Argelius, a planet without violence, where the inhabitants are as peaceful as sheep. The entity would be as a hungry wolf in that fold.
Gentlemen, I know something of the law. You're engaging in sheer speculation.
Perhaps. Mr. Spock. The murder weapon.
Computer, report on analysis of Exhibit A.
Working. Exhibit A on visual. Composition of blade, iridium. Composition of handle, mironite. Details of carving on handle conform to folk art forms indicating place of origin.
Specify. Point of origin.
Artifact produced by hill people of Argus River region. Planet Rigel 4.
So you persuaded now?
No. That doesn't prove anything. That's circumstantial.
Anyone could have been to Rigel 4 and brought a knife.
Yeah.
In fact, Hengist could have brought this knife himself and not used it to kill.
Mm-hmm. If I was him, I'd be saying, yeah, it's not me. Still, the vast majority of evidence points to Scotty.
The problem that he had is he acted too...
eager.
Yeah, but when they started moving away from his theory of the killing, he was too agitated rather than trying to play it cool and formal.
That's what I'm saying, yeah, he was too eager to point the finger at someone else.
Yeah. At this point, anyway, he makes a break for it and is killed by a single punch from Kirk.
Well, his stunt double is with a bald cap.
Looks like the same guy to me.
No.
You always pick up on that. I never spot the stunt doubles.
Yeah.
Anyway, they surmise that the creatures left the body of Hengist and entered the ship's systems.
And this is shown to be the case as we hear his high-pitched voice laugh and scream Rajek over and over again while whipping around the room.
Spock notes at this point, as the lights change, that the entity is controlling the computer. And Kirk worriedly notes that, hang on, the computer controls my ship.
They lift the body onto the chair before...
Yeah, why?
I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. That's a Weekend at Bernie's situation.
I've noted that in McCoy and Scotty prop the corpse of Hengist up on a chair for no apparent reason.
So don't trip over him.
So you don't see him breathing.
Yeah.
Spock can't access the bypass circuits and suddenly a terrifying image appears on the screen.
Yeah, but they are able to cut the audio conveniently.
That's fortunate. Spock thinks this creature may well kill them all, but first it will try to generate terror and fear.
So, Kirk puts out a ship-wide communication telling everyone to stay calm. They don't even know what's going on.
No, yeah, they've been fine. He then asks McCoy, I think we heard at the top of the show about sedatives. He's basically going to tranquilise the entire crew so that they don't get scared.
And he tells Spock to come with him whilst the rest have to remain where they are. So outside in the corridor, Spock agrees that they could try focusing the computer on an unsolvable problem, but they almost get assaulted by the turbolift.
Yeah, Spock's nearly prevented from entering as the door tries to close itself, and then once they're in the lift, it starts to plummet.
Fortunately, they can override the controls.
Yeah, he hasn't thought of that, eh?
No.
They then make their way to the bridge as an alarm sounds, indicating that life support is no longer functioning.
So they exit onto the bridge to find that the life support system's manual override isn't working.
Yes, and Sulu's a bit agitated. He confirms the problem and is told to resume his station. The entity then speaks over...
Yeah, but did you not like... there are a couple of times where Kirk dismisses Sulu's... He's not got time for Sulu's questions. And he's told there's a malfunction. And I think Sulu laughs at the thought of dying from malfunction.
Yeah, he makes a joke later on about this being the first time he's been threatened by a malfunction.
It's not really, is it? I mean, a malfunction could do that. If you're in a spaceship and there's a malfunction, you're going to die.
But I think it's the vocal proclamation that you're all going to die.
Yeah.
That tickles his fancy. Kirk then does a shipwide announcement saying, prepare. Oh no, he doesn't. He tells the people on the bridge to prepare their manual overrides as they may be necessary, and he crouches down next to Spock, who is jury-rigging a fix for the life support system.
Yeah, he seems to have fixed it for the time being, but says that they have a few hours at best.
I mean, I wouldn't be so sure. The last time we saw Spock under a constantly set the whole ship on fire.
That's true, yeah. He was at it.
Yeah. Remember that was Balance of Terror? He was trying to help the Romulans.
Yes. Kirk, however, thinks that a few hours is long enough.
At this point, a nurse comes to the bridge trying to sedate everybody.
The voice continues to taunt them as Spock starts to implement the impossible problem in the computer and laughs at Kirk's warning that he will destroy himself if he destroys the ship.
I think Kirk's trying to distract the entity at this point to allow Spock to get to the stage where he can activate his program.
Yeah, it talks of the fate worse than the fate worse than death that is about to befall him. But Sulu has just did his job and thinks this gloomy talk is quite amusing.
Yeah, he thinks everything's amusing at this point.
A giggling little fool.
Spock implements his program and he and Kirk head out to the briefing room to calm down the Argelians who they're quite concerned about.
It tells about this unsolvable problem.
It asks for the full readout on pi.
Yeah, which is
3.141 something or other.
Something or other.
I think there is no end. It goes on forever.
Precisely. So it appears to have worked anyway.
Well, yeah, and Sulu's not sure what's going on. He's just wandering around the bridge, looking around, not quite aware of anything.
Just doped up to the eyeballs, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he got an overdose.
Anyway, satisfied that it will keep the creature busy, they head back to the briefing room, as you mentioned, as they suspect the Argelians, not the Algerians, will be in a bit of a panic.
In the briefing room, McCoy is in the process of inoculating everyone, and Spock reports that the number quiz is working.
Yes, because the entity has fled.
Yes, McCoy notes at this point that if it's forced out of the computer, it will have to go somewhere else.
And Kirk asks what would happen if it took over a sedated body.
Yes, McCoy says that only himself and Jarrus are not yet sedated in any event, and in a tranquilized body, the entity would be restricted to non-harmful activity.
Yeah.
I think he says knitting or something like
that. So a worried Kirk tells McCoy to take his shot, and there's a moment of suspicion which I quite liked.
Yeah, as if, yes, he's been possessed already.
Yeah, but Kirk orders him to do so, and he does.
He does, and it turns out it's Jarrus who is being possessed by the entity.
Yeah, but he is easily overpowered by a nerve pinch from Spock.
He is, so the entity reanimates the corpse of Hengist, grabbing a nearby yeoman and threatening to kill her.
This whole jumping from body to body reminded me of a couple of movies, one of the Friday the 13th, but also The Hidden with Claudia Christensen.
Okay.
Or is it Claudia Christian?
I can't remember.
The Hidden's a good movie from the 80s with Kyle MacLachlan. Where it's a creature possesses bodies and goes from person to person. Well worth a watch. Hidden gem. Quite hard to get a hold of. She plays a stripper as well, actually.
In that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've read her autobiography. It's quite good and interesting.
Yeah?
Yeah. She was very fond of the alcohol and other sort of substances as well. And she hates the Scottish accent.
Does she?
Yeah. Because, what's his name? Her ex-movie actor, Scottish guy. Anyway, apparently she claims he was very abusive towards her.
So now she hates all people who speak that way?
She's got a bump in the head just like Scotty.
Yeah. Anyhow, Hengist, rather than using this yeoman to protect his position, throws her at McCoy and then is taken down easily by Kirk.
Indeed.
It's quite lucky he didn't use that power he had earlier on to make Scotty forget everything and freeze.
Yeah.
Anyway, Spock injects Hengist with the tranquilizer, and Kirk picks him up over his shoulder to head to the transporter room.
They pass by the rest of the crew who are all giggling and
Well, they did
laughing.
a lap so that everyone could see Kirk carrying a man.
Yeah, and let him smack his butt.
And then they head to the transporter room as the entity rants on about killing everyone.
When they get there, Spock, I like that, shoves one of the operators.
Yeah, well, Kyle is working the transporter and he's tranquilized, so he's got no
giddy.
idea what's going on. Spock shoves him out the way, as you said, and then he transports Hengist's body out into space on a wide dispersal field setting.
That won't work. I've seen it again. I've seen a number of movies, horror movies especially, where they try and do this. You know, maybe you blow up Jason from Friday the 13th, whatever, but the parts will come back together.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally only a few episodes since we saw a non-corporeal entity in space take the ship down.
Yeah. I think, the Terminator as well. You can see it all building itself back, so that's not going to happen.
No, I think it'll show up again.
Should do.
Kyle at this point complains about Spock shoving him, saying he would have got around to it.
No, you wouldn't have.
Eventually. Scotty and McCoy show up and confirm that Jarrus is fine.
Yeah, and then on finding that the crew will be out of action for 6 hours, Kirk agrees to relax and he wants to go back down to one of the cafes.
Unfortunately, he won't be able to take a tranquilised crewman with him, and Spock doesn't seem like the best choice.
No, it doesn't seem like a good wingman.
I'm not sure if he decides at the end not to go, or if he's just contemplating whether he should go by himself.
No, he decided not to go.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
He asks Scotty as well at some point why he's so happy, and he says he's relieved because he thought he'd killed all these people. He knew that he'd killed all these people.
I think so. I still think that's the truth.
I'm not convinced. I mean, that's my first note at the end. I'm not convinced that Scotty didn't do it, at least the first one.
It's in the same sort of level as whether or not Mrs. Columbo exists or not. There's enough doubt there.
Yeah, you're supposed to believe one thing, but yeah. Do you not think that this sedative that McCoy's used is a bit of an overkill?
I mean, either a bit of an overkill or not enough. It should have perhaps sent them all to sleep.
Yeah, they could have. They've done that before in space. He'd gassed the floor or whatever of the ship.
He's given them enough for it to be pleasurable and enjoyable, and that's not the purpose. It's not a.
Yeah. I think similar to what we said in Mud's Women in season 1, the computer knowing who's telling the truth is like an advanced lie detector. It's rubbish. Yeah,
and the computer's powers have obviously changed, but that's, I suppose, it's not necessarily a
firmware upgrade.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a new version of the software.
Rigel 4 is the 4th inhabited Rigel planet we've heard mentioned so far. Do you remember the others?
1, 2, and 3.
No, Rigel 2 was referenced in Shore Leave. Right. I think McCoy had been there at some point. Rigel 12, Mud's Women, is where the miners were. And Rigel 5 a few weeks ago was where they'd done this experimental procedure that they used to speed up blood production.
There you go.
And there's lots more that get mentioned in the future.
Do you have any other trivia for us?
Well, let's get into some of this. This originally aired on the 22nd of December 1967. Directed by your favourite, Joseph Pevney. 12th about 14, so we're running out of Pevney episodes. And we discussed him in Arena, so if you want to hear more about him, go back to that podcast. It was written by Robert Bloch.
Psycho.
This was the last of his 3, and again, to hear more about him, you go back to the podcast for What Are Little Girls Made Of? The original Sex Robot episode.
The best.
Hengist was played by John Fiedler. And this was his only Star Trek appearance, and he's perhaps best known as the voice of Piglet from Winnie the Pooh.
He has a familiar face. He's a character actor.
He appeared in a number of other shows, including Macmillan and Wife and Banachek, as well as Columbo, where he played a doctor in the season 1 finale Blueprint for Murder, which makes him this week's Columbo connection.
The only one?
Well, the only one so far. He died in 2005 when he was 80. When Charles Macaulay appeared as Landru in Return of the Archons, I opted to skip his bio in case he was needed as a Columbo connection when he returned to the show, and as it turned out, I don't need him for that, because I just had one. But anyhow, I can tell you that his performance here as Jarrus was the last of his 2 appearances on the show, and he also appeared in 3 Columbos, Ransom for a Dead Man, Etude in Black, and Mind Over Mayhem, as well as 7 Perry Masons, amongst other things. He died in 1999 at the age of 71, which means he must have been about 40.
No way. He looked about 60. Come on, we've discussed this before. That guy's not 40.
Yep. He's younger than you. Still very slightly older than me.
Okay.
Pilar Surat played Cybo. This was her only Star Trek performance, but she also showed up in series like Hawaii Five-0 and Bonanza, and she died in 2001 when she was 62. And Charles Deercop played Morla, the guy that you didn't like with the nose.
Well, I did like him.
Okay. Tell me what you think about him then.
Well, I know him primarily from being Doyle Lonigan's sidekick henchman in The Sting.
That's not one of the ones that I've listed. He made appearances in shows like Bonanza and ER, and he was in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah, but he's most famous for being in The Sting. You follow?
Anyway, he's now 84 and not yet dead as far as I'm aware.
He's got a great old school tough guy face, no, James Cagney gangster.
He looks like he should be in westerns.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, the court scene was over 15 minutes long and apparently the longest uninterrupted scene. Because normally they have them flicking back to the bridge or whatever when they have these
break
long
up
scenes.
a little bit, yeah.
This is the first episode to prominently feature Scotty, and there's another one in season 3.
Okay. Is he also a pest in that as well?
Oh, no doubt. When Cara, which is the first victim, I don't know if we mentioned her name, was killed, the scream that we heard was actually Nancy Crater's scream from the Man Trap.
Was it?
Yeah.
There you go.
In terms of international titles, in Germany this was Der Wolf im Schafspelz, which means wolf in sheep's clothing, which would also work.
Yeah.
And in Japan it was Wakase Arugaliasu no Satsujinki, which apparently means murderer on the planet Argelius. Nothing earth-shaking there.
Nah.
Next time, it's the 15th episode of season 2, The Trouble with Tribbles, which is an iconic episode and one of my very favourites.
Aha, okay. I will certainly look forward to that then.
In the meantime, we're on social media at Trek Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and the music's pretty right now, isn't it, already? Theme tune.
Possibly.
Closing.
I'll shift
Nobody can hear this. Instagram as well, and you can go to astartrekpodcast.com for a post on each and every episode. And if you prefer, you can listen to this on YouTube, where we put the episode up each week.
No one prefers that, but anyway, maybe in the future they will.
You never know.
Until then,
cheerio.
Bye bye.